Personally, when I talk to people in the community, and I know a lot of people now, and when I've asked them about this, even people that may be opposed to an increase in salary or whatever, I don't think I've ever run into a person who didn't believe they already get compensated for this. And I think I tell them no, and they said, why wouldn't you give somebody their gas money or their parking if they're doing this for me, especially when people find out, say for example, they went to your property to look at something that you were doing zoning. I've actually had people that found out later that this person had driven all the way across the county, spent their own money, and were surprised that they didn't get compensated to come out because they're the citizen requesting the zoning change. So I just wanted you to know, I've never really had anybody that thought it was improper.
Glenn.
Thank you, sir. Just for some enlightenment for our committee here, we've got a guy sitting over there that called on 16 cities as the county chair. So I'd like to hear Frank's input on that because it had to be a tremendous expense on you.
Glenn, I appreciate that. The only thing that I've really set my mind on doing is having this as a listening session. I have written down everybody's points, but I think my comments would be more appropriate on the October 12th meeting, and so I'd rather leave it at that point, but I appreciate it.
Okay. Did I hear someone else? Someone cleared their throat. Okay, that's all right. Okay, Jim, does that complete your presentation?
That completes it. Once again, I want to mention to Dr. Bailey, I appreciate that. They may come forward and say they have something, but the impression I had was that the council feels that it's a very well-written charter, and these were the only issues that they had, that they thought that you, and I think there's a real respect that they're trying to keep a distance in being an independent body, but they felt that these were the few that you should, those two were the few that you should consider.
That's a very valuable insight for us to have.
It is. Okay, now, at the last, why don't you stay there? No, stay there, because we're going to ask you some questions. At the last meeting, when we were breaking up, Stan Escudero asked me about the possibility of getting some data from the county or elsewhere that would be helpful. And I think, and I'll let him pose it in his own words, I think he's thinking about the economics of the county and what we might be able to do in terms of review of the charter that would be helpful economically. So I told him that I'd gotten something 2 days before that from John Albright that gave some data. This is public data. I sent it to him yesterday, emailed it to him, gave it here to the staff, and they're going to make it a public document so everybody will be able to see it. So Stan, would you like, and so we talked to Jim about that, and so would you like to just rephrase what it is that you...
Sure, yes. At our organizational meeting, Jim, you probably recall that one of the things I suggested was that this body commission a study, a very quick one, making use of existing published information available rather than conducting surveys on their own, in order to give us on this commission a very clear picture of what sort of county we're dealing with. The charter, of course, has not been reviewed for 10 years, and while it still may be precisely what is needed for the county, it may also be a little bit off target because the county may have shifted a bit underneath the charter. And so I thought that it would be good if we could have a professional economist have a look at the trends in the county over the past 10 years or so. Trends within the county, comparisons of this county with other similar counties in the state of Florida, and with the averages for the state itself, so we can see where we are and where we have been and where we're likely to go. In population, for example, things like the average age or the number by area for Volusia County, employment, things like job numbers and job numbers by salary or areas of employment, that is not geographic areas, but areas in which one finds employment. Population movement, how much have we grown? Have we in fact grown? Have we grown evenly or unevenly? What are the average ages of the people who come here? What are the ages of the people who leave? What's the rate of birth here? Is it increasing, decreasing? Are we getting more retirees and less people in the peak of their working years? What about property values? Up, down, sideways? What about the rates of residential growth or the rate of commercial growth? And then looking toward the latter, what about the regulatory climate? Are there more permits now needed or less? What about construction permits? Are these easier to get or less? Business permits, that type of thing. And then the overall tax structure, multiple taxing authorities in the county. In some cases, we have 2 or 3 organizations which fundamentally do the same thing in their area of the county, but function as separate taxing authorities. How is that done in other counties? Are we unique? Are we nearly unique? Or is this common practice? In short, where do we stand vis-a-vis the rest of the county? So now, when I said that, Mr. Hebner mentioned that there was an economist for University of Central Florida whose name is Mark Soskin, who had done studies like this before. So in the interim, I took the liberty of meeting with him. I had never met with the man, and asking him if he would put together a proposal, a formal proposal for such a study, so that we could see what a thing like that might look like. You could take a look at his proposal and see how much of this information you could provide based on information which the county already has, and how much of it, especially with regard to other counties and so forth, would have to get, perhaps Mr. Soskin or some other person would get from elsewhere, and roughly what he would do it for, because you did say at that organizational meeting that there would be some financial resources available if we decided that we wanted it. In the interim, there has been an article in the News Journal which criticized the tendency of county officials to conduct studies, pay for them with the taxpayers' money, and then not do anything about them. And I don't want to fall into that trap. If we were to organize and hold a study and pay for it with taxpayers' money, and then we don't do anything about it, that's a horse on us, not on the study. I would argue that we should make full use of that study in consideration of what changes we might make, if any, to the county charter, and with a much better understanding of the kind of county that we are targeting. Otherwise, we're going to hear from special interests, and frankly, not very many of those, at these listening sessions. And we will hear from people with particular interests in our working sessions who will hopefully come forward and present us with written ideas of change to the county charter. But these are going to be little snapshots of different areas based on the special interests of the people who are putting it forward. What I would like to see is for all of us to have a common point of reference for the county as a whole, to which we could refer these things when they come forward. And, God willing, that would promote agreement amongst the 15 of us. So.
Okay, I looked at all that, and I think I can give you some information you'd be pretty happy with. First of all, I'm pretty sensitive to getting criticized for spending money to produce reports on things that we already have. We've done enough studies by economists, so we already have a lot of stuff. But here's the issue. Let me read off to you. I looked at what he proposed. Not a bad proposal. The good news is I can give you everything he has in there and not cost you a dime more because we have to. Because we have to run an organization where we know these things. So for example, in economic, I can give you, and I can give you more than this. And here's the thing I like about this. I don't feel apprehensive about gathering the data for you because it's factual data. It's not opinion, it's not subjective, it's factual data. So unlike if we were going to do a report that had some kind of subjective material, somebody could say, I'm trying to influence something in your behavior. This is factual that you can prove that. So as long as I think I can produce that. So for example, in economics, you can see we can give you, and we can give you a lot more than this. This is just a potpourri. Property taxes and millage rates, the budget, general fund per capita, the state comparisons between counties.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 30 minutes.
The county and school property values, taxable and classifications, and we can do sales tax, option, the local option, and local option fuel tax, consumer price index, on roads, lane miles, road conditions, VOTRAN, ridership. We can do stuff on K-12 in school, colleges, job training, inmate population, arrests, health of our inmates, building permits, housing availability, wages per capita, personal income, unemployment rate, employment, population, land mass, beach miles and beach safety, ethnic race diversity, median age, health indicators on obesity, mortality, clinical care, uninsured, access to care, environment, air pollution, drinking water, homelessness. I can give you an overview of all these things at no additional taxpayer cost.
For 10-year periods, so we can see the trend?
Yes, yes. The other thing that I can provide, okay, and once again, I feel comfortable about this because you're talking facts. I could provide, there are people that on my staff, for example, said we got into economic development. I could give you, like, my economic development administrator could come here if you were looked at it and wanted somebody to clarify some of the stuff for you. Because sometimes it doesn't hurt to have the professional explain some of the data. So if you ever said, I understand that, can somebody explain those trends a little bit better for you? He can do that. Once again, it's all just straight factual. And anyone that's ever come to our, has anyone ever come to our quarterly briefings over at the airport? I mean, people, because what Rob does is he goes through some of this, and it's a really eye-opener for a lot of people on what our region's really like. We've had to have this data to perform our job. And quite frankly, in this case, I think you have a lot of data that's already been gathered by agencies. Be glad to provide it, and that way I don't think you'll get any criticism that you're paying twice for information you already have.
Can you give us this in comparison with other counties or with the state averages in these areas?
I'll tell you what I can do. I can give you different alternatives, and the one you want is the one we'll do.
And Mr. Chairman, I don't
Yes.
mean to interrupt, but we have 15 members of this board. All 15 members need to get all this information all at the same time. It's not appropriate right now. It would be appropriate on October the 12th to get that information.
Well,
I'm not saying not to have the information, but we're going to discuss all this again.
Okay, well, let me ask a question. Are you saying that, let's say he could get it done in 10 days, and we send it out to the members of the committee, would that be okay?
I don't have a problem with that, just for information purposes,
Yeah.
but not for us to be discussing it.
Well, we can't discuss it because we're in violation of sunshine.
That's my
So
point.
therefore, no one ever do that. Would you do that?
But we're technically discussing it right now.
I think we want to correct the record on that one.
I have to object. I think we're technically discussing it right now, to be quite
But I think
honest.
we're in the sunshine.
Where is that?
So we're okay.
But as a board, we're not really supposed to be putting that much into our discussion here. We're supposed to be listening to bring it back to the
Okay.
full body
So-
for further discussion.
Okay, so since someone out there hasn't made the suggestion, we need to wait and make the suggestion when we get into full session, is that?
I believe we should. I really do believe we should.
Well,
And Mr. Chairman, I think, if I hear Stan, we need someone to help us digest. There's huge amounts of data, huge data dumping, actually.
Right.
So I suspect you have those resources where we can look at some charts, some
Correct.
curves, some 20 years from now, blah, 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 and so on. But a database is fine, but I'm really interested that we do have so much here, much more than I think most of us know about.
Okay.
well, Mr. Bruno, as I understand it, Mr. Dean is not proposing to give us this information now. He's suggesting that he can provide us all the information which could be provided commercially, and that we can get it for nothing, and that we could then make use of it if he were to provide it to us sometime between now and the 12th of October. That would give us time to look it over, and then, but we wouldn't talk about it among ourselves, and we certainly would have no basis for the discussion of it until we entered a working meeting. Is that what you're saying? Because I certainly agree with that. If that's,
No problem with your statement there. I have no problem with that at all.
Well, why don't we do that?
Okay,
Anybody
here's,
object to that? Okay, it's done.
here's what we'll do. We'll try to do a first draft, because we'd be willing to give you more after you look at it. And I do think, as Dr. Bailey said,
Don't give us too much.
no, and here's the other thing. You gotta watch you don't get lost in this data. And once again, I'm comfortable because it's all factual stuff. There's nothing subjective about it. And what we could do is, for example, I think you would find fascinating on the economic development data, after you look through it, you may want to have someone here, which I have like my economic development director, that could clarify verbally to you what some of that really means. And I think you'd learn a lot real quickly that way on how to read some of that data, if you like. We'll follow that up with whatever we asked to do. And the other thing is, I think the criticism that you mentioned, I think that sometimes we go overboard because a lot of times we do use private sector people to help us. But this is one time I don't want to get criticized, and I think you don't want to either, that we have the data. And a lot of this stuff is kept, like the property appraiser keeps on purpose. So we might as well take advantage of it.
Jim, this is a document that you'll have there, and it compares counties.
Right.
But I would like for you to add a county that I'd like to see, because they had a downturn and an upturn, and that is Polk County.
Candy.
Bigger than us, but they've had a downturn in the agricultural area and an upturn in terms of manufacturing. So if you could include that county in your comparison. Any other counties that you think might be, and in here they've tried to take counties that are comparator sort of, not exactly, but sort of.
One other good thing I think about us providing the data at no public cost is that it may be harder to explain to people how what you learn relates specifically to the charter, as it is that if you were doing it for specifically trying to draw an industry, for example. So no one can criticize. You may say, that helped me in my deliberations, but it may be harder to articulate how that actually affected the charter. This way you don't have no argument. You didn't spend any public money to do it.
Okay, are there any other comments? Thank you all for coming. We're standing adjournment.